Forget treasure maps and talking parrots. The pirate you know is a carefully crafted fiction, a romanticized character designed to entertain, not inform. Hollywood erased the true, radical nature of piracy to sell us a story of charming rogues and drunken adventure. But the real story is far more dangerous to the powers that were. This wasn't a fantasy, it was a rebellion. We've been sold a lie about who pirates were, what they fought for, and why they were truly hunted down with such brutal efficiency. The truth is, the empires that defeated them had to destroy their legacy and replace it with a caricature. They had to make pirates seem like chaotic, insane criminals because the alternative, portraying them as organized freedom fighters, was a threat to the established order. In this video, we're pulling back the curtain on the greatest propaganda campaign in history and uncovering the revolutionary reality of the men who dared to challenge the world. The Golden Age wasn't a timeless era of sailing villains. It was a specific, explosive period from about 1650 to 1730, a perfect storm born from war, greed, and opportunity. Imagine this: the great European empires, England, Spain, and France, have spent decades fighting each other. They employ thousands of privateers, essentially legalized pirates, to attack enemy ships. But when the wars end, these highly skilled, violent sailors are suddenly unemployed. Meanwhile, the flood of treasure from the New World creates incredibly wealthy shipping lanes. The result? A generation of expert mariners with no income and a target-rich environment. They weren't born outlaws. They were created by the geopolitical and economic conditions of their time. This was less a spontaneous crime wave and more a massive, unauthorized workforce seizing the means of production, the ships and the sea lanes, for themselves. To understand why a man would become a pirate, you must first understand the hell he was escaping. Life on a legitimate merchant or naval ship was a floating dictatorship. Captains were tyrants with absolute power. Sailors were subjected to brutal, often fatal, discipline like floggings with a cat o' nine tails. The food was rotten, the pay was meager and often withheld, and the work was backbreakingly dangerous. You could be pressed into service against your will by gangs in port cities. For these men, the choice wasn't between civility and crime. It was between a short, miserable life under a whip or a gamble on freedom and a share of the profits. Piracy wasn't just a criminal act. It was a mass labor strike. It was a desperate bid for dignity, fair treatment, and a voice in their own destiny. They weren't rejecting work, they were rejecting tyranny. This is where the myth shatters completely. Pirates were not lawless anarchists. They were governed by strict, written agreements known as the Pirate Code, signed by every member of the crew. This document was their constitution, a social contract that laid out the rules of their floating society. It detailed everything: the equal distribution of plunder, with compensations for injuries lost in battle. A lead was worth 600 pieces of 8, an I 100. It set rules about gambling, cleanliness, and even lights out. Most shockingly, it limited the captain's power. The code ensured the captain was elected by the crew and could be deposed by a majority vote at any time. This was a radical concept in an age of kings and absolute authority. The pirate ship was not a vessel of chaos. It was one of the most meticulously organized and democratic spaces in the 17th century world. The pirate ship was a stark contrast to the authoritarian structure of every other institution at the time. It was, in essence, a primitive form of democratic socialism. The crew was the sovereign body. They voted on everything: where to sail, which ships to chase, and even the fate of their prisoners. The quartermaster, elected to counterbalance the captain's authority in battle, handled daily affairs and distributed food and money fairly. This system of checks and balances prevented the kind of tyranny they had fled. It created a powerful incentive for cooperation and loyalty. Why die for a king who doesn't know your name when you could fight for your crew and your own direct share of the wealth? This hyperdemocratic system made pirates incredibly efficient and resilient. It proved that ordinary men were perfectly capable of self-governance, an idea so threatening it had to be crushed. The romantic idea of pirates digging for buried gold is mostly false. Their most significant and chillingly pragmatic target was the transatlantic slave trade. Slave ships were floating treasure troves, carrying not only human cargo but also gold, ivory, and other valuable goods. More importantly, they were poorly armed and slow. Pirates would attack these slavers, seize the ship, and often offer the enslaved Africans a choice: join the pirate crew as free, equal members, or be set free at the next port. This made pirates a direct threat to the economic engine of colonial empires, which depended on the brutal institution of slavery. They weren't just attacking ships, they were attacking the foundational commerce of the superpowers, destabilizing a billion-dollar industry and offering a dangerous alternative to the enslaved, a chance at freedom and power. Nassau in the Bahamas was the ultimate pirate utopia, a republic of pirates that functioned as a sovereign state without a king. At its peak, it was a bustling, chaotic hub of thousands of pirates. But how did it work? It was a fully functioning shadow economy. Pirates would bring their plundered goods, sugar, tobacco, cloth, to Nassau, where a network of fences and merchants would buy it all, no questions asked. The money would cycle back into the port, paying for repairs, food, drink, and shelter. It was a safe harbor where they could rest, resupply, and be protected by the sheer number of other pirates and their guns. Nassau proved that pirates didn't just exist on the fringes. They could build a self-sustaining, alternative society that operated completely outside of imperial control, making it a massive thorn in the side of the British Empire. When military force initially failed to stop the pirate threat, the empires turned to a more insidious weapon: information warfare. They launched a massive propaganda campaign to demonize pirates in the public eye. Government-sponsored newspapers and pamphlets began circulating sensationalized stories of pirate cruelty, madness, and godlessness. They emphasized torture, summary executions, and chaos, systematically erasing any mention of their democratic codes or fair treatment of crews. The goal was to strip pirates of their political and social context and reframe them not as rebels with a cause, but as monstrous, psychopathic villains. This dehumanization was essential to justify the next phase, a war of extermination. They had to make the world believe they weren't killing freedom fighters. They were cleansing the world of evil. The end of the Golden Age was not a gentle decline. It was a systematic, state-sponsored genocide. The British Empire, realizing the existential threat of the Pirate Republic, sent a new kind of governor to Nassau, Woodes Rogers, with a fleet and a mandate to eradicate piracy by any means necessary. His strategy was twofold: offer a royal pardon for those who would surrender, and then hunt down and publicly execute those who refused. The message was terror. Pirates were hanged in mass public spectacles at execution docks like Wapping in London, their bodies tarred and hung in iron cages called gibbets at the entrance to harbors, where they would rot for years as a gruesome warning to any sailor who might consider mutiny. This campaign of terror was brutally effective, wiping out the pirate havens and their leaders within a few years. So, what remains of the pirates? Their legacy isn't buried treasure, it's the powerful, subversive ideas they embodied. Their model of direct democracy and social contract influenced Enlightenment thinkers. Their struggle echoes in every labor movement that fights for fair pay and safe working conditions. They were pioneers of a form of social insurance, caring for their injured and disabled. The pirates proved that a different world was possible, one not ruled by hereditary kings and tyrants, but by consent and collective agreement. They were a flash of lightning in the dark age of absolute authority, a brief, brilliant experiment in freedom on the high seas. Their true treasure was the radical idea that ordinary people have the right to govern themselves. And that is an idea that can never be erased.